Book 4, Chapter 5 of the late Mr. Jonathan Wild the Great. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Dennis Sayers. The late Mr. Jonathan Wild the Great, by Henry Fielding. Book 4, Chapter 5, containing various matters. The day was now come when poor Heartfree was to suffer an ignominious death. Friendly had, in the strongest manner, confirmed his assurance of fulfilling his promise of becoming a father to one of his children and a husband to the other. This gave him inexpressible comfort, and he had, the evening before, taken his last leave of the little wretches with a tenderness which drew a tear from one of the keepers, joined to a magnanimity which would have pleased a Stoic. When he was informed that the coach which Friendly had provided for him was ready, and that the rest of the prisoners were gone, he embraced that faithful friend with great passion, and begged that he would leave him here. But the other desired leave to accompany him to his end, which at last he was forced to comply with. And now he was proceeding towards the coach, when he found his difficulties were not yet over. For now a friend arrived, of whom he was to take a harder and more tender leave than he had yet gone through. This friend, reader, was no other than Mrs. Heartfree herself, who ran to him with a look all wild, staring, frantic, and having reached his arms, fainted away in them without uttering a single syllable. Heartfree was, with great difficulty, able to preserve his own senses in such a surprise at such a season; and indeed our good-natured reader will be rather inclined to wish this miserable couple had, by dying in each other's arms, put a final period to their woes, than have survived to taste those bitter moments which were to be their portion, and which the unhappy wife, soon recovering from the short intermission of being, now began to suffer. When she became first mistress of her voice, she burst forth into the following accents: "O my husband, is this the condition in which I find you after our cruel separation? Who hath done this? Cruel Heaven! What is the occasion? I know thou canst deserve no ill. Tell me, somebody who can speak, while I have my senses left to understand, what is the matter?" At which words several laughed, and one answered, "The matter? Why, no great matter. The gentleman is not the first, nor won't be the last. The worst of the matter is, that if we are to stay all morning here, I shall lose my dinner." Heartfree, pausing a moment, and recollecting himself, cried out, "I will bear all with patience;" and then, addressing himself to the commanding officer, begged he might only have a few minutes by himself with his wife, whom he had not seen before since his misfortunes. The great man answered, he had compassion on him, and would do more than he could answer; but he supposed he was too much a gentleman not to know that something was due for such civility. On this hint, Friendly, who was himself half dead, pulled 5 guineas out of his pocket, which the great man took, and said he would be so generous to give him 10 minutes. On which one observed that many a gentleman had bought 10 minutes with a woman dearer, and many other facetious remarks were made, unnecessary to be here related. Heartfree was now suffered to retire into a room with his wife, the commander informing him at his entrance that he must be expeditious, for that the rest of the good company would be at the tree before him, and he supposed he was a gentleman of too much breeding to make them wait. This tender wretched couple were now retired for these few minutes, which the commander without carefully measured with his watch, and Heartfree was mustering all his resolution to part with what his soul so ardently doted on, and to conjure her to support his loss for the sake of her poor infants, and to comfort her with the promise of Friendly on their account. But all his design was frustrated. Mrs. Heartfree could not support the shock, but again fainted away, and so entirely lost every symptom of life that Heartfree called vehemently for assistance. Friendly rushed first into the room, and was soon followed by many others, and, what was remarkable, one who had unmoved beheld the tender scene between these parting lovers was touched to the quick by the pale looks of the woman, and ran up and down for water, drops, etc., with the utmost hurry and confusion. The 10 minutes were expired, which the commander now hinted, and seeing nothing offered for the renewal of the term, for indeed Friendly had unhappily emptied his pockets, he began to grow very importunate, and at last told Heartfree he should be ashamed not to act more like a man. Heartfree begged his pardon, and said he would make him wait no longer. Then, with the deepest sigh, cried, "Oh, my angel!" and, embracing his wife with the utmost eagerness, kissed her pale lips with more fervency than ever bridegroom did the blushing cheeks of his bride. He then cried, "The Almighty bless thee, and if it be his pleasure, restore thee to life. If not, I beseech him we may presently meet again in a better world than this." He was breaking from her, when, perceiving her sense returning, he could not forbear renewing his embrace, and again pressing her lips, which now recovered life and warmth so fast that he begged 10 minutes more, to tell her what her swooning had prevented her hearing. The worthy commander, being perhaps a little touched at this tender scene, took Friendly aside, and asked him what he would give if he would suffer his friend to remain half an hour. Friendly answered, anything; that he had no more money in his pocket, but he would certainly pay him that afternoon. "Well, then, I'll be moderate," said he, 20 guineas. Friendly answered, "It is a bargain." The commander, having exacted a firm promise, cried, "Then I don't care if they stay a whole hour together, for what signifies hiding good news? The gentleman is reprieved," of which he had just before received notice in a whisper. It would be very impertinent to offer a description of the joy this occasioned to the two friends, or to Mrs. Heartfree, who was now again recovered. A surgeon, who was happily present, was employed to bleed them all. After which the commander, who had his promise of the money again confirmed to him, wished Heartfree joy, and, shaking him very friendly by the hands, cleared the room of all the company, and left the three friends together. End of Book 4, Chapter 5. Read by Dennis Sayers in Modesto, California, for LibriVox.